and welcome to the studio for today's roundtable discussion on how to turn the tables on tomorrow's threat agent, sponsored by Menlo Security. I'm delighted to say I'm joined here in the studio by Nick Edwards, Vice President of Product Management at Menlo Security, and virtually by Rahul Bhardwaj, CISO for APAC at Kroll. Thank you both very much for joining me today. I'd like to just kick it off by asking, and maybe if you'd like to, in your first answer, just give a very brief introduction and background as to what you do in your roles. Let's just start off with, the change in trends that we're seeing now. Remote or hybrid working has become more permanent. So what does that mean in terms of traditional security approaches? Should they be changing? Should they be completely different? How are you approaching that? Nick, maybe I could start with you.
Sure. Well, good morning, Sasha. So I'm responsible for product management at Menlo Security. So that includes product strategy and product planning. And a lot of my decision-making gets informed by what I hear from customers. And what I'm hearing from customers based off of remote work is that the traditional security model needs to evolve. It is broken. In the old days, everyone commuted, they took the train, they went to the office, they had this security perimeter. And then that was good. And everyone went out to the internet from that way, and the data and applications were under control. That was easy. And then when they went home, they would use their VPN, these endpoint things that created a secure session of the office. And now that remote work has gone from maybe 1 in 5 employees to maybe upwards of 3/4 employees, the whole model has changed. And it's broken how traditional security practitioners have thought about it, invested in technologies, built their teams. And it does, force a reconsideration and a thinking about, how to evolve to that, knowing that this trend is pretty much here to stay. And so that type of thinking, I think, is causing customers to reevaluate. And it's also causing, I think, some vendors to abuse terminology that is well known in the market, like zero trust and these things. And I think it's really incumbent upon people who are in the middle of that to evaluate their business needs, map it to where their company's kind of roadmap is from where they're taking their workforce, and then trying to map the security architecture to that.
You say customers know that their needs are changing. What are they asking you for, and what are you advising that they go with?
So I think what they want to be able to do is make sure that they have a consistent set of security policies for all their users. Whether it's someone who's going to the office every day, or whether it's someone who's on the road all the time, whether that's the engineer who's living in his van, cruising across the United States, checking in code over a kind of a cellular network. And also they want to have the same policies regardless of what computer they're using to access whatever they're trying to access. And as I mentioned, a classic model of firewalls and VPNs are just not designed to do that. So customers are looking at ways to leverage cloud services to more effectively do that, as well as understanding in further detail, who the users are, assessing their security posture as they access these technologies, and then adjusting what their privileges are based off of that time and place, who they are, what they're doing, and what they're trying to access.
It's interesting. Rahul, let's bring you in. Thank you so much for joining us here today. What do you do in your role, and how are you finding things have changed?
Good morning, Joshua. I'm CISO at Kroll. So day in, day out, our job is to protect Kroll intellectual property and the data we have been entrusted by our clients. So manage the team, work closely with my business within the APAC region, but also spearhead a lot of enterprise corporate programs. I think Nick has pretty much summed it up really nicely. The traditional model of having a hard perimeter security is gone by the day we started going hybrid and then started allowing people to remote check in their work. I think I use this term a lot in my day-to-day job. I think for today's information security community, CISOs like me, data is the perimeter. We have to go all the way to the data level to secure it. People can access it from the comfort of their home, cars, mobile phone while they are jogging. So if we can't provide the same amount of secure controls and security in all different facets and equipments which are been allowed to access this data, uh, the security model will fail. So you need to be agile. You need to make sure business is given all the means to grow. And that is not possible with the traditional security model, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rahul, does that mean your role has fundamentally evolved as well? And I'm asking you this because I was reading some interesting research by Gartner, which was saying that the role of the CISO has to be reframed, and that while cybersecurity and risk concerns used to be maybe more just your remit, they're now actually a huge business risk, given that we're all working remotely. How has that changed?
Very correctly said, Shasha. I think that traditional role of CISO and the image of CISO being a good technology and technologist is changing and has changed and evolved over a period of time. Now we are very much part of the business decision making. I think every CISO, including me, is no different. We work with our business. We want to know as early as possible what our next product offering will be, which region we are hitting, how our consumer are going to consume this service, what are the channels based on which, and then what's the underlying technology stack. Because if the product is already developed and then we are thinking of security as an afterthought, we are failing out there. So security by design is only possible when business leader look at security as an integral part of doing business. And as a CISO, we need to go and sell this idea that we are here to add value, and then look security as an integral part of the overall services and product development lifecycle.
Absolutely. Nick, you're nodding there. In the clients that you deal with, are you seeing that shift in the CISO role? Are you seeing that shift in the risks and the responsibilities in that they're being spread across the business and not just sitting with the CISO?
I think it varies segment to segment, but I can speak to Menlo Security, and in our company, the CISO is essentially my peer within the product organization itself. So there's VP of engineering, VP of product management, and the CISO for the reason that Rahul mentioned, which is around making sure that we are all, thinking about strategy and product execution, as well as securing our company consistent with the policies and the frameworks that our CISO is operating under. So I've been at companies where it lives with the CFO or the HR. There's a lot of different models out there, but I think, to your point, like looking at where we are as a workforce writ large, I think that is, kind of one of the more prudent ways to go about, executing.
Yeah, I mean, it says here, this same Gartner survey, 88% of boards regard cybersecurity as a business risk rather than solely a technical IT problem. I mean, that's a huge percentage.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think unfortunately, all the ransomware aspects that we've seen, nation states weaponizing these things, it's changed, in my career from, the kid in the basement, to, full on dedicated teams of people, an entire value chain of ransomware actors where the person who sells you one aspect of it is not the same person who's negotiating the ransom. I mean, it's a non-trivial part of the economy in a sense in terms of its construction.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a bit about new threats. Can you tell me a bit about, since we've had this new distributed working model, this new way of working from home, have there been new threats that we should be more aware of, and how have you dealt with them?
So I would say there's a couple of trends that we've seen. I mean, one is just that, in a sense, the browser is the new office. If you roll the clock back maybe 15, 20 years ago, we sat in conference rooms with meetings. You might have had WordPerfect. I mean, really dating myself here. But now, like, I think a stat from Google is we spend 75% of our time in the web browser or in web conferencing. Right, that's where we're spending our time. And the bad guys know this, and the attack surfaces evolved from just a computer itself, primarily to targeting the browser. And I think that combined with the fact that we have remote work, a lot of people have two-factor authentication in. There's some very high-profile attacks in the past couple of weeks in the States by, gig economy type of companies, where in a sense, the hackers were social engineering these tools that are used for you to use, two-factor authentication to access, corporate assets. And it was just kind of this fatigue thing. They kept hitting and hitting and hitting, and ultimately the user was like, okay, forget it, I'll just accept it just to make it go away, And that's something that wouldn't have happened before. That person would probably be, in the office all day, or maybe at that time they didn't have two-factor authentication set up because it wasn't as necessary. And it's a totally different attack surface area that I think the industry is trying to wrestle with. So, we have, perspectives on how to deal with that, but I think ultimately, companies, need to take stock of, what they have, what the landscape looks like. And, similar to what Rahul's saying is, okay, where are we going as a business with our products, with our services, and making sure that the security pieces are programmed into it, as a forethought, not an afterthought. And I think historically it's been the other way. Hey, we ship this product, security, keep us safe. Now it needs to be, hey, what do we need to do to achieve these business goals? CISO, security people help us.
Although I feel like that's always said, we have to make it a forethought, not an afterthought. But inevitably, what happens is we change the way we work. And at that point, we're not thinking about the security threat. It only happens afterwards. Rahul, how do you change that pattern?
So I think I will just add a couple of things Nick has told in this distributed working model. I think I'm a firm believer that my security program and my security framework is only as strong as the last chain in the enterprise. That's my employee there. And they are also the first line of defense for me. Awareness became, if not the single most important aspect in this whole thing. I can have tons of control, but if I don't have a security conscious workforce, especially in this distributed working model, I'm going to lose this battle day in, day out. I think Nick rightly said so. I think the attack surface is now extended to that endpoint control and the device on which my end user is sitting on the comfort of his couch and accessing the most sensitive data of my firm. So I need to make sure my security program is able to provide that protection on that device the application is accessing, and most importantly, that individual is security aware, is conscious at the backdrop that he's been watched. He can be target to the next social engineering attack, and what steps he needs to do. I think as a CISO or as somebody who is running a security program, we need to make sure we are constantly reaching out to our employees, workforce, contractors, our partners, letting them know what we are doing, how they can reach out to us, what resources we have made available to them. And it's simple to say that, but you have to do all that in parallel to making sure that you're not hindering their day-to-day work habits. I think security, which is integrated into your day-to-day work habits, makes life a lot easier. And then having really good endpoint security control, knowing what's out there, white listing the application. Like I know 90% of my workforce will use these 10 to 15 application day in, day out. I need to secure them no matter what. And then most importantly, knowing among the larger group of your workforce, which are the one which have access to sensitive data, so that you can work with them to enhance their work patterns and enhance monitoring around those identities. So I think those are the new things. The adversaries out there have been becoming more and more potent. They are being very specific. They're using all means of social engineering, and then with this new age of digital and social media, your adversary almost know almost same amount of data as your spouse knows about you, unfortunately. So they come prepared with things to scam you and make sure they have a lot more data on you to social engineer you. So awareness has become probably the most or single most critical in fabric which brings the overall security program together.
Are you finding that, Nick, as well in your work, that people are asking you specifically how they can help their employees just increase their awareness? Does that come up a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we build products that I would say are adjacent to the education aspect of this, but we get pulled into building features to help extend their training of their users. And that's a big part of it. And, and that's probably a net good thing for the industry. Again, 20 years ago, like, we weren't trained. You watch the thing on day one and you're probably still trying to turn on your laptop, that kind of thing. But nowadays it's ongoing training, ongoing certification, and that's a net good thing. And I think the more we can do that to make sure there's a baseline to address the weakest link, I think that's a good outcome for the industry.
So a question for both of you, where does the responsibility lie for a security breach? Does that come knocking at your door, Rahul? Who is responsible ultimately?
I think security is everyone's job, but if you are the head of security group, I think you will be the first one who will be asked question about this. So I think that's one of the perks which comes along with this job. But yep, I think security breach and I think one thing which has happened immensely, and I can say with a smiling face, is that the board and the larger community has started to getting this sense that it's not only that group of folks called security team who's responsible for this. I think it will take the entire village or entire community to safeguard the firm and ensure that we are secure and ultimately, yes, things may go downward. It's as a firm how prepared you are to recover quickly and most importantly to identify that early on when it's just a blip.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. I mean, I before I was doing this, I was a submarine officer in the U.S. Navy, and in the Navy, the captain is the one who's responsible for everything. And sometimes it felt unfair, like, oh my God, the captain's asleep and some bozo like runs the ship into the ground or something. Like, that didn't seem fair, but ultimately it meant that the captain took it seriously enough that he made sure everybody was at the level of training and sophistication and professionalism to keep everybody safe. And I think the successful companies, have that level of engagement all the way at the top, from the CEO to the board, all the way down. And it just so happens that people like Rahul are the ones, like, that's their title. But people like Rahul are also the ones making sure that they operationalize that mentality and that philosophy throughout the entire team, throughout the entire capillaries of the global organization. And so hopefully, CEOs and leaders will really embrace that and not just treat it as just like another annual assessment. I got to do it, along with sexual harassment and all those other things. It actually really has to be something that they embrace to get good outcomes for.
I love that analogy. That's a great one. So on that note, then, how far should CISOs go to make themselves completely informed about the vulnerabilities in their organizations? You talked about, 75% of the time we're on web browsers, and that is the new threat right now. How far do CISOs have to go to understand what the next threat could be?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably one of these things where there's no magic bullet. It's just good management principles, like the CISO needs to make sure that they, hire well, they train well, they develop people, that they're kind of, execute towards a roadmap that is forward looking as well as addressing kind of where they're coming from. And I think, the industry sometimes always looks for like the shiny new object, this shiny new security widget that's going to keep everybody safe. But realistically, it's like some of the more stronger teams, kind of are very deliberate and may take a longer time to steer the ship or steer the car, but they do it in a way that's secure and safe, and they, execute according to their business needs. So I think
there isn't a quick fix, really, is there?
I don't think there is.
No. Yeah. Rahul, what are your thoughts? You were nodding there when Nick was speaking.
Yeah, I think Nick put it perfectly. There is no. I wish there was a silver bullet. But yeah, I think knowing this vulnerability early on is the key to success of any security program. I can tell you at Kroll, we spend a lot of time in terms of sitting with our business, just knowing our technology stack. If I know what is under the hood, I will make sure I'm better equipped to fix if something goes wrong, or I will have those uh, uh, threat intel set up to tell me if there is a zero-day vulnerability announced for one of the component which has been used within my technology stack, or have those alliance and partnership with the vendors whom we are using broadly within our technology stack. That will help us to prepare well. That helps us to make sure that our patching cycles, our patching strategies to keep our system and product up to date are aligned to the vulnerabilities threatscape we are looking within the firm. And it also not limited to technology, I think. And this is where, Shasha, to previous question in terms of what CISOs needs to do and how our roles have evolved, we need to work with business to know what is the next geography they're going in, what's the domain we are working in. Are we stepping into financial services more because that's more prone, lucrative, and top of the list of adversaries, or are we our next product offering is leaning towards healthcare data within here in North America because that's highly regulated. So I need to make sure my baseline security control might not cut it. I have to go over and above on some of the aspects. So yes, as a CISO, the sooner we get to know about them and the more we can prepare, the more we can practice, you will have the right tools within your arsenal to meet any adverse situation. So yes, if as a security team, you're not spending more time in identifying this vulnerability early on, I can bet you will end up spending more time in fixing things which will go broke.
It is part of the challenge when businesses are expanding or considering new lines of business is that they don't really consider the security aspect. So they will think about the business aspect. And can it be an issue sometimes that they don't really bring the CISO or that part of the business into that conversation till they're too far down the road?
Yeah, I think that as I was saying, that if as a CISO and business you are not aligned at a strategy level, if I as a CISO not aware that hey, our next offering is a multi-cloud, multi-tenants, and will be available on different endpoints, as a security program owner, my architects will not look at those finer aspects, and we will not look at the geopolitical risk, what's happening in the world today with Russia, Ukraine. No matter which sides you pick, you will be a target of one group or the another. So you need to know which geographies you're dealing, who all are your clients, because we live in a very interconnected world today. Your clients, your partners will have access or some access to your network. You need to even look at what they are doing, especially the ones which have more and larger access to your network, to your data, if you are strategically tied to them on some service offering. So if as a CISO, as a security program, you're not aligned with your business, you don't get those feelers early on, and then you're not part of those discussions, no matter what technology-wise you do, you will never know the breadth of your attack surface.
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit about proactive action. Have you ever taken proactive action that's been successful to combat threats? And is that what clients ask you for?
So I think what we try to do and what we educate our customers on is trying to understand again kind of how their users are trying to do their job, and also understanding where the classic model of you scan something and then you identify badness, where that works and where it might not work, and then try to apply the right tool to the right area. With a lot of web traffic now, it's so dynamic. It's targeting the browser in ways that browser security has not evolved to address. There are a lot of different ways to kind of keep people safe, but from our perspective is you want to just keep that traffic off of the browser as much as you can. And so, our approach to use that is using isolation as a technology. Basically, we're isolating the endpoint browser from the internet, and we are rewriting that traffic and delivering them a clean stream. In some way, shape, or form, this type of approach, I think, will be kind of the mainstream model for different aspects of technology and internet security. And it isn't necessarily eliminating the kind of proactive detect and then identify, but it's trying to deliver as much of a clean pipe as possible with as little room for alerts and false positives and all these things, because Rahul's team, they're always looking at tons and tons of data, and what I hear continually is they don't want to have another source of data that they have to sift through the needle in the haystack to find that one bad thing out of a pile of like 100 things that may or may not be bad. So the more and more customers can try to address alert fatigue while upgrading their security posture with new technologies, I think they'll get the better outcome from a security point of view.
Do you agree with that, Rahul? And do you find it possible to be proactive?
Yes, I think everything Nick said, I'll echo the same sentiment from the CISO side of the house. I think we definitely do not want another tool out there who is sending me tons of information without any particulars around that. On the proactive side of the thing, Sasha, I believe like every other security team, yes, we have our own threat hunting team internally, which looks at our technology stack, look at those vulnerabilities which I just spoke, working with different vendor alliances to know what's happening. And at the same time, I think internally, the way you set up an architecture or overall network and technology can go at great length to safeguard you. I think if you are having a segmented network, I think eventually, no matter which industry you are, which segment you are, you will have cyber events. I think if you architect and then have proactive measures to identify these events early on before they turn into incident, eventually into breaches, I think that's the key. 0 days are something which is unavoidable. Again, if you know the complete landscape of your technology, you know which areas are exposed to that, and try to figure out how you're going to put compensating control till the time the patches are out there, and then you can go in and fix them. So yes, there is a lot of things going on proactively from the security side of the house, and then I think it's always that cat and mouse game we play with adversary. The better you are prepared, and then some of this goes back to basic hygiene of security, and then following certain fundamental principles to segment your network, making sure you're patching your endpoints and your infrastructure and scanning it and going and fixing the issues in a timely manner. That's what needs to happen. And most importantly, I think it's very difficult in today's modern era where you have this whole influx of alerting and log generation due to the heavy traffic flow we see. I think as a CISO and as a security team owner, I rather prefer to figure out what my legitimate traffic look like. It helps me to understand, okay, my business A, 5 application needs to talk to these 3 applications on business B to get the job done. And these are the protocols they use. I think if you understand your business, understand your technology and the network traffic, identifying those anomaly becomes a lot more easier. So yeah, I think spending time understanding your own network and then having dedicated teams like threat hunting to go out and then look what's happening, finger crossed, learning from others' mistakes to come back and see if your network, your architecture is covered against those kind of threats, can go a long way.
And I think we know we can never have 100% protection, but how close to 100 can it get, Nick?
So I think it comes down to what price do customers want to pay. So at Menlo Security, some of our biggest customers are governments, militaries, technology companies, and similar to Rahul, their intellectual property is very dear to them in a sense, whether it's governmental or military secrets, whatever. And so I think where these companies have come from is this model where they had one network which was available to the internet. It was kind of dirty, because it's available to the internet. Then they had the really secret stuff. That network was not connected to the internet. Even as extreme in some cases where they would have a kiosk with a laptop where people would have to book time in, like going to the library to go and do their job on the internet. And so what's the side effect of that? Well, it slows productivity down. It's in some ways not necessarily more secure. And then also what we're increasingly seeing is these organizations can't recruit like Gen Z millennial talent. Like who wants to work at those companies? I wouldn't. I'm Gen X, So I think what companies are realizing is they're trying to integrate the reality of work today in a way where they can maintain security. And I think the 100% is an ambition worth striving for. But yeah, I think it's like that story of, if you're in the woods and you're with your buddy and a bear comes, you only have to be faster than your buddy, okay? And I think companies need to just continue to stay abreast and, like you said, learn from the mistakes of others and try to continually aggressively get better each day, each month, each year. And hopefully you can minimize your exposure. Unfortunately, what history has shown us is there are always going to be companies who just are in a different place in their evolution. And sadly, they're the ones that a lot of these nation states and attackers are really focusing on.
Absolutely. Rahul, what about the 100% ambition? Where are you on that?
I think that's a question, Shasha. As a CISO, as a security executive, you get asked a lot by the board and other executives, I can tell you. And I'll say you that every firm is 100% secure till the time they announce their next breach. And I think that's when reality struck them. To answer your question, I believe we go by the philosophy of security by risk. I think you need to know where your secret sauce is, what's the crown jewels are, which you are out to protect them. Set up your network in a way that you safeguard that dearly. And if you are able to identify what the secret sauce is, where that intellectual property is, and as I just answered you on the previous question, what the legitimate traffic and connection to that particular segment look like. I think that's as close to 100% you can get. You will always have, with this ever increasing interconnections and an API world, you will always have connections coming in and going out. But I think unless you know what you are out there to protect, that won't happen. If somebody is going to say that I'm going to protect like every connection to my network of my firm, I think then best of luck.
Absolutely. Well, I'm afraid we have run out of time, but thank you for such a great conversation. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you.